Welcome back. Efforts to fund the fight against Zika stalling in Congress. The FDA, meanwhile, is expanding emergency authorization for Hologic's Zika testing. The authorization allows the diagnostic company to test more people for Zika for longer periods of time after potential exposure to the virus. Joining us right now is the CEO of Hologic, Steve MacMillan. And Steve, it is good to see you.
Great to see you,
Thanks so much for joining us. Give us a status check. Where are we in terms of these tests to help contain the spread of Zika? Hologic has 2 different tests, right?
Yes. So we've made tremendous progress really just in the last 6 months. And for all the issues of government and business being on opposite pages, this has been a great one where the CDC, the FDA, came to us early this year. We put our team on it, and we've had a long history of developing HIV testing, all kinds of different things. So we developed the Zika test, and it really is for 2 things. One is if you donate blood to, say, the Red Cross or CTS, anybody who makes a blood donation, we screen the nation's blood supply on behalf of the Red Cross. We sell them the equipment and the assays, and they screen that. The other is if you happen to be down in Miami or somewhere else and just think, wait, maybe I came across it, you want to go be tested, we can also test for that. So we got both approved, and also for both blood and urine, so which lasts longer. So if somebody wasn't quite sure, we can go back and retest. So
how worried are you about Zika right now?
It just as a human health issue, for the average person, it's not necessarily a huge issue, but obviously the implications for women, and particularly pregnant women, and we as a company have been kind of on the leading edge of women's health issues for our whole life, between breast cancer, cervical cancer, and now Zika, and particularly, pregnant women. You don't want to take the chance of, having a newborn baby with this. So that's the real scare.
Yeah.
And the fact that this can be sexually transmitted is obviously a concern, so that even if a man gets it, and could pass it on to a woman, that's, I think, the concern. And that's why we've been working very closely with CDC and with FDA on this issue.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So are we prepared for the screening? I know you guys have come up with the machines. Do we have enough, or do we need to keep deploying them? Where are we in that cycle?
Sure. We've been ramping up, as you can imagine, very, very quickly. And the FDA has been great, actually, and CDC, in working with us to get the systems out, as well as our partners at the American Red Cross, to get our systems in place and be able to test. The primary focus has been more, kind of Florida, Southeast, but also even, some of the West Coast. And I think what we're seeing is we're getting ready to be able, if needed, to be able to screen across the country.
Let me ask you about the breast cancer, because you say you've been on the front lines in terms of women's issues, and Cigna is now approving insurance for 3D mammography to detect breast cancer. You're a pioneer in this area, 3D mammography, obviously. How penetrated is it? And what's the difference, do you think, the mammography machines on the market today versus 3D mammography?
Sure. I think the Cigna decision was the first major private payer to now fully reimburse. The government has already started to do that with CMS, and I think it's really seeing the weight of the data. So in terms of the development of 3D, we have about 1/3 to 40% of our existing 2D machines have moved over to 3D. So there's still a significant opportunity ahead. And Marie, you know it really well, but the 3D, the advantage is it reduces, basically, we're able to detect about 40% more cancers. We've also been able to reduce the false positives by about 15, and in many cases more than that percentage. So we're reducing the need for basically people to go back and have biopsies that don't need them. So it's been a tremendous advantage. We're still really in the early to mid innings of the adoption cycle.
Big runway, Shelby.
Yeah, and as you said, these are huge women's health issues. I have friends who won't even travel because of Zika. I have older friends who are worried about getting breast cancer. But generally, I want to go back to the funding, because there's this huge battle over funding for Zika. How does it impact you, and how does it impact the broader fight against Zika? Because the CDC director just said we're virtually running out of funds.
Yeah, it's
halting long-term studies. It's impacting testing.
It's certainly a concern. You'd like the government and industry to kind of come together. And it's funny, if you take a macro perspective on the world, right? In the rest of the world, most governments are working with business to try to support business and job growth. Really look at it. Look at a CEO who travels around the world. You show up in every other country. You are completely, they roll out the red carpet. They want your business. They want you to create jobs. They want you to create manufacturing jobs, R&D jobs, whatever. And in our country, what's concerning is this political process for the Zika funding debate to be held up over, frankly, concerns about, frankly, Planned Parenthood clinics in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we have, over 300 million people on the mainland U.S., and for this thing to be held up for months and
the regulators have done their job, though, where they have prevented Theranos from their Zika deployment system because it didn't meet the regulator standards. So they approved your system. So at least we do have the correct systems in place, and they did do that.
Yeah, I tell you, look at CDC and FDA, they're doing their job, I think, day in and day out. It's the government stuff,
Congress.
It's Congress that really, I think, is the big issue. But, we've been very, CDC and FDA, they were on the phone with our teams literally a couple of times a week early this year when they saw Zika coming up, and they gave us effectively what's known as an emergency use authorization. So they moved with incredible speed. Now, it took the private sector to be able to do that.
Right.
And that's where it's finding that right blend. You need government oversight because, to your point, Theranos is a perfect example. You absolutely need the government oversight, but you also want them working to help where you can and making sure that the public is well protected and going from there.
Steve, one of the top stories in the Journal this morning, Starboard prods Perrigo. Starboard, activist investor, taking a 4.6% stake in Perrigo, worth nearly $600 million. You've had your own dealings with activists, Carl Icahn, Relational. What's your take on this?
We obviously had a very positive experience with both Carl Icahn and Relational, and I think at the end of the day, while they had a very clear point of view they wanted for Hologic, they wanted to break the company up or sell it. Both of them, and Carl particularly, listened to our plan to create value in a different way, which was get new people in and grow the business. And ultimately, Carl became a big supporter. I think he was actually a positive force at helping to create change within the company and gave me a lot of latitude to work with our board and with our team.
You've got to feel great about that.
I think there are days where I think there is a role for activism. I think a lot of it, it's like anything, right? There's extremes. But if you work with them, you can find good people. And Carl turned out to be a tremendous ally. And I think our company is far stronger today for it. And he exited gracefully this spring, and we're on a great trajectory.
You dealt with him great. At Perrigo, they're telling them to consider shedding non-core assets, including the prescription pharmaceutical income business. You have to feel like when you're a CEO and you've got this outsider telling you what to do, it's hard.
It's not a lot of fun, that's for sure.
So. A little pressure. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Steve MacMillan is the CEO of Hologic. As we